our kids know we're not perfect. So are we going to admit it?
Yeah.
Or are we going to act like we are?
And to own it and tell them in front of them, say, this is where I mess up. And you know what? I'm going to ask you to do something that Jesus does for me every day. Will you forgive me? Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Christmas series of the Anything But Quiet Time podcast, where we are finding Jesus in our favorite Christmas movies. And can I just start out the Santa Claus, Tim Allen?
Yeah.
It's the first time I have realized in all these years, because it's the 30th anniversary.
That's right. Yeah.
Of the Santa Claus, that it's not the Santa Claus, it's the Santa Claus.
The legality of the,
If something should happen to me, put on my suit, the reindeer will know what to do. Yeah, right.
Which we see later in the movie, we see the clause and why there's an E, but I never recognized, because I'm only looking at Tim Allen on all the movie posters, he's wearing a Santa Claus hat. Oh, the Santa Claus.
The Santa Claus, right.
No, it's the Santa Claus.
Right. As we learn later on the back of that card.
I am one of those people that if there was a contest at who could figure out who did what first, you would want me on your opposition because it took me 30 years to realize.
You have an eye for the obvious, as the saying goes.
Anyway.
No, it is the 30th anniversary. By the way, we started this series last week with Frosty the Snowman.
Yes.
I thought it was one of the best conversations we've ever had about a Christmas movie. And it was like, it's only a 30-minute show.
Less than.
It's not even really a movie, honestly.
And it started with Caleb, my son, saying, hey, the magician's like Zacchaeus.
Yeah, right. That's a really good, I like that.
It was good.
So the Tim Allen becomes Santa Claus.
Yes.
And in this is
after killing Santa.
What's that? Oh, whoa.
No. He fell off the roof on his own.
It wasn't murder.
No, it was not. No.
It was manslaughter.
It was. It's gotten really dark really quick. But no, full of hijinks and antics, and of course a sweet story in the end. But we open with the corporate Christmas party.
Yes.
The company Christmas party, and the opening credits are going, and it's that fun Jingle All the Way, which we're going to do in this series this month too. Kind of opens the same way, that 90s, corporate Christmas. I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
But I thought one thing that was interesting that it was one of those we kind of laugh off, and it just made me think about a conversation of does culture influence what we see in the movies, or do movies actually influence us and how we live and what we think?
What do you think?
I think it's both.
I think you're right.
I think, of course, they make movies based on what happens in life.
Sure.
But then I think you have a movie like the Santa Claus and bigger ones than that are timeless. Mm-hmm. And they've influenced even from how we are as kids into, that's the tradition. That's what everybody does. Or this is totally okay, when it's really not.
So when art imitates life, I think you get hotel art. When you have something to say, you get a Picasso.
Yeah, that's true.
You get something that's a little bit, I wasn't expecting that. Van Gogh. You get something just.
But what is being said is as believers, what we got to go, well, is it true? First of all, do most people act this way? And even if so, is it biblical?
Right.
And you see an opening scene of, it's just all in fun and joking, and Tim Allen says something on the microphone of, hey, we work hard and our family sacrifice, but our families aren't here right now, and that's probably why Johnson's secretary is sitting in his lap.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's super inappropriate. Like, if
she should not be sitting on his lap.
No. I mean, if his wife showed up, right? If anybody's wife showed up, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And somehow it's laughed off.
In some ways, Tim Allen, he's not, Santa Claus.
Scott Calvin.
I should have said Scott Calvin, because he's not Santa yet. He didn't kill Santa yet.
Right. No, they didn't kill Santa at all.
Manslaughter. No, but he's like pointing it out, which like in awkward situations like that, when things inappropriately are happening, it's almost like, hey, I'm going to point this out on a microphone. That's not necessarily.
But everybody just laughed instead of like, you know what I mean? Like,
if there was like a calm in the audience, that's when the secretary immediately gets up off the lap. Never feel like you have to laugh along with everybody else.
Yeah.
Because that could have been just a statement.
Yeah,
as opposed to a like but-unch.
Well, and I just thought it was interesting. It made, because a friend thought that he thought movies only show what happens in real life.
Unfortunately, it does happen, but
of course. But I think that it influences then culture for years later. That can become a norm, right? And that's scary. That's dangerous.
No, it's definitely. Honestly, though, I think we've probably We've probably moved a little bit forward when it comes to, and I know it's relative and where you work, but with the sexual harassment videos that are now in training and things like that.
That's true.
We have seen advances where women have for years, even if you're familiar with the show Mad Men, you would see that this is, I'm an objectified human being in this office. I will only get to this level. Might as well just sit on the lap because this is what is expected. And so I think there was for years, that was an imitation of life. We're starting to see where people they have a voice now to say, okay, and now I have traction with people behind me. This is not okay.
Yeah, that's true. That is one area I think that's probably true. That's gotten better, hopefully. But I think, obviously in just the beginning, just the stages of the beginning of the movie, it just shows how ugly divorce is.
Yeah.
And I think I just kind of maybe honed in on it even more because I know somebody that recently went through a divorce and how just unfortunate that it is. And it's not, I think sometimes you start talking about divorce and it can seem like you're saying, well, if you've ever gone through one, you were wrong. Well, the situation is wrong. It's not what God intends, but there are all sorts of circumstances where that may have been your best option because of the actions of what the other person was doing. We really don't know. I don't know if there was ever an indicator of how Scott Calvin and his wife were split up. We just see the step, parent, or I don't know if they're married or not, what Neil is, but it's that dynamic is not good.
Yeah, it's kind of subtext maybe of him working in a corporation that is all about, making money with that doll.
Yeah.
He's a toy. Weirdly, his initials are SC and he's making toys.
That's right. It was meant to be.
But it could also be one of those discrepancies with script writers that you're like, so did you just edit that part out?
Well, I think they acknowledge that in the classroom. The classroom, he goes for the parent-teacher day, and of course the PJs say SC, Scott Calvin, and then he's trying to convince the son believes you're Santa. No, I'm a toy maker.
No, I mean the problems between his mom and dad.
Oh, okay.
So that's not something that either the writers wrote in or was edited out. So yeah, you're right. We don't know why but maybe his passion for working and spending less time at home, or
you could see that. Right.
But there's, one of the probably most checked boxes on divorce papers is irreconcilable differences. And so whatever that is, here's this little guy in the midst of all of it and not really connecting with his dad. You see that clearly he is not Betty Crocker at home. It's a comedic situation with the turkey literally bursting into flame after spraying it so much with a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
So many times. And then it still erupts in fire.
Right. Yes. And of course they end up at Denny's. It's the classic place to be.
They're out of everything. Regular milk's fine.
Well, he even before that, they have the conversation with Neil and that how are they going to treat the Santa Claus conversation? And obviously, just if you have little ears listening, if you've seen the movie, about the type of conversation, who believes and who doesn't. But I love that he says that line that we've even quoted on our radio station. Sometimes believing in something means you just believe it.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting. It's truth, but it's also sloppy at the same time, because at the end of the book of John, it actually lists eyewitness reasons to believe. So you don't literally just believe something just because you believe it. There should be evidence, but then at the same time, I don't have to have every box checked.
Right.
And I really do. At the end of the day, do I believe that Jesus really is who he said he was? Well, I really do.
I think if you're listening from a trusted person, it's when the disciples are gathered in that room and Thomas has been told by everybody that this has happened, but he's the only one who hasn't seen it. And Jesus does tell him, blessed are those who have not seen and yet still believe.
Right.
Well, I don't think he means like any Tom, Dick, and Harry coming along telling you, hey, you should believe this. I think you were surrounded by brothers.
Right.
You were even the men, when the women first approached them and said, we've seen Jesus.
Yeah, they didn't really believe.
They did not believe. Yeah. And so Jesus is trying to encourage what faith can look like, regardless of having hard evidence, if you're with trusted people. And so, in this situation, this little guy has trusted parents who are clearly not necessarily engaged in what they think is truth, but they're going along with.
Well, and I'll say this was a little bit later. I had a note for later. It kind of applies more to now when he's seeing the sign. Of course, this is later at the North Pole, and we can get to that. But when even Scott himself, he's seeing the signs like the PJs.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of the disciples who didn't believe until there was indisputable proof. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, they just couldn't deny it. It was just Jesus really did. He's there before them.
Yeah.
He really did rise from the dead.
There's a sleigh in front of you right now, a reindeer.
It's just happening. It's reality.
Right there.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna call the police. I'll carry the stuff up there, let them deal with it, okay? Whoa. This guy was huge.
What was it in this movie, or am I connecting other Christmas movies now? But sometimes seeing is not believing. Believing is seeing.
I don't think that's this one.
Was it not?
What is that?
I thought it was, but anyway, it made me go, okay, first of all, we've talked about the thing where if you just reverse quotes and make it sound super intelligent or something.
Right, yeah.
But it is a part of, I think, the faith process, certainly as a child. I'm not obsessed with proof.
That's true. That's true.
Jesus tells us you're going to have to believe as a little child to even start to get the kingdom of heaven. You won't be allowed in the kingdom of heaven. And I think there's something there too. The whole, I'm not going to go because I've got all of this written down. How do the reindeers fly? Well, they get fed carrots or whatever the parents are coming up with as information to help maybe answer the questions that the kids are having. But for a lot of them, it's enough to know that mom and dad said Santa.
Sure.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I just know. And that's enough. And then the older we get, we live in a broken world. And unfortunately, we are taught by our community not to trust anything.
Sure.
Or anyone because of scam artists and thieves. And frankly, even some of our own family members have betrayed us. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so were you wrapped up at that point, or?
Yeah. The next point I kind of have is about the elves. So if you have anything before that.
The relationship that Neil has, first of all, if you're in a situation where divorce has taken place and you're just trying to make the best of it, it is a sticky place. My brother walked through a divorce. It's a term our friend Raina Raina uses, walked through a divorce. I think you're always on that journey if children are involved. Certainly you're on that journey even if it's just your own emotions. You'll always be connected to that other person in some way. And if you have children, it's manifested. There's our connection literally walking in front of us because it's you and me and our DNA helped create this person. It can be really tricky. And there have been books written about being a step parent and how should I engage. And just because somebody has a doctorate, Neil is this doctor of psychiatry, and doesn't mean that he should be given a voice into the situation. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have good things to share.
But let me talk first. I'm a doctor. What?
I'm a doctor of psychiatry. But that's how everybody defers. They go to the doctor in the room. And I need to be careful of that, to study to show myself approved when it comes to situations too. I don't know in a divorce situation if every step parent should have a place in every conversation, but that's definitely a conversation to have with the adults prior to engaging a child. And trying to work out with some civility, if at all possible, for the little one's benefit or for the older little one's benefit. It's so valid and necessary. And not everybody's going to be on board with that. And so when you can apply that, great. If they're not choosing to be a person that you can have those kinds of conversations with the other person in this relationship, hopefully if you're with the future step parent, you are having good conversations with them so they know where their place is, because that can be really hurtful even as a step parent.
Yeah. But it's hard to look at this, especially we don't even know the grounds of the divorce.
Yeah.
We don't know whose quote fault it was, or just, both of them drifting apart or what. But I think the one thing that I can look at, even though it's great for the movie, the one thing that I can look at and go, this is wrong in every situation. Because like you're saying, how much should people be involved? It kind of depends on every situation is a little different.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that Tim Allen's snide comments in front of his son
Not okay.
are not good. And I think you can just say, listen, of course it's tempting. Of course it's funny. It's Tim Allen in this movie. But I think that you could say with certainty for 100% of the time, that's not going to be helpful to discredit the mom or the stepdad in front of at all, I guess, but especially in front of the son. You want to try to have as much unity in that unified front as possible.
Absolutely. Your kid is also going to probably show you where you're at in relationship with them. We see the little guy, Charlie, does not want to stay with his dad. Please come home as soon as possible. And quite frankly, the dad is so disconnected. He loves his son. You can love anything, but has he poured into his child? Has he really committed to that relationship with his child?
Yeah.
Neil is willing to do that.
That's true.
That can also make you feel a certain way, cantankerous against the future step parent or whatever. But the kid is letting his dad know, my preference is with mom because she listens to me. We hear that a lot. Neil listens to me.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you want to do the things that I want to do? How comes the things that I think, and say are stupid?
Right.
And he's not a teenager where he's starting to independently kind of try to go, how am I going to be a man? Or if you're a woman, he's this little guy who's looking for guidance and direction, and he's just noting truths.
Right.
He listens. I'm not trying to be a little bratty kid here.
And it reminds me honestly of another Tim Allen movie. I think it was Jungle to Jungle.
Yes.
Where, finds out has this kid and then the kid's never been to New York. And so he's explaining things that, somebody from another country wouldn't understand. And it's a kid, he explains earlier in the movie what an obligation is. And he describes it as doing something that you have to do even though you don't want to. And later in the movie, the kid says something of like, well, we have to do this, you said. And he's like, yeah, sorry, I'm just obligated. And the kid
makes that connection.
So you don't want to do it.
Yeah, you don't want to do it.
And I know that the Tim Allen, that kind of thing of where you can, the foot and mouth and you realize kids are listening.
Yeah, they are.
Kids are listening. They pick up on what we say and even our mannerisms.
And you just own it.
Yeah.
Because my kids have caught me in a place where we're frail. We're human beings and we are faulty. And that's why we need Jesus. And to own it and tell them in front of them, say, this is where I mess up. And you know what? I'm going to ask you to do something that Jesus does for me every day. Can you give mommy grace? Will you forgive me? Yeah. That's not okay. And I don't want you to feel that way.
Our kids know we're not perfect. So are we going to admit it?
Yeah.
Or are we going to act like we are?
And we show them through our admission of guilt and needing forgiveness that it's okay when we do mess up to ask for forgiveness.
Sure.
Because there's going to be a point in time where they're going to need it.
Yeah.
And if they feel like, I can't do this because everybody around me is perfect. Because you've made yourself out to be faultless.
True. Yeah.
Then
that's just bad for them in the long run.
How are they going to live?
So obviously a lot happens where you said homicide, manslaughter, finds the card, the Santa Claus. He gets, he's in this sleigh. He's kind of half dressed with the Santa. He doesn't even have the hat,
He's wearing boxers at one point.
He's wearing boxers, puts on the big old pants.
Yep.
And then they get to the North Pole. And
don't forget the soy milk comes later from the encounter with the little girl.
The soy milk, that's right.
That's a standout scene.
Yeah.
I'm lactose intolerant.
You're supposed to drink the milk.
Look, I am lactose intolerant, and I am just about this close to taking all those presents back to the chimney with me.
That's right. That's good.
Poor baby girl.
The elves, when they get to the North Pole, they continue to be confident in spite of Scott being such a hater because they knew the truth.
Yeah.
And isn't that true in our day and age of elves they were just like, this is how it is.
Yeah.
They kind of kept on their pace and they didn't go, you can't say that. That's so mean. Like Facebook posts don't operate this way in our society. If we know truly what's true, if somebody comments, against Christianity specifically, okay.
Yeah.
We might have a good discussion on the reasons you believe what you believe. We can have that. But as for me getting all riled up about it, the elves didn't because they knew what was true.
Yeah. Except for Bernard a little bit.
Bernard was a grouch.
He was a little bit grouchy. He was older, clearly. And he was like, you're just going to have to accept it. He wrote, and his voice rose a little bit. And everybody, But yeah, the
awkward
elves were
moment.
very
Yeah.
accepting. What's interesting though is that Charlie had already accepted the role well before his dad did.
Yeah.
And I think about, and I don't want to overuse the verse, but Isaiah talking about a child leading them. Our children lead us constantly into good things. No, yes, children also do things they shouldn't, and they have to be guided as well. But there are moments of purity and innocent faith, just beautiful. And it's something that, I wish we were robbed of our innocence when we were at one point in our life, whether it was teenagers or hopefully it wasn't before you should have had that taken by the world.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. It's almost like we're inducted into the older we get and realizing that the travesties around us exist. But this little guy just knew right away, Dad, we got to do this. You got to put on the suit. The card says we're supposed to do it. You told me Santa was real. You did.
You did, yeah.
We're going to go. And the elves are telling us what for. And Charlie doesn't waver the entire time.
That's true. No. And that's what causes all the trouble the next year.
Yeah.
And then you see Scott, now I almost thought about it as kind of a new believer. He starts to be a little odd in society.
This time he's going total tank.
Wait a minute. No way. No way Santa's going anywhere without his sleigh.
And not that we want to be the weird Christian, but if there are certain things of like, I'm not going to join in, or for example, in his, it was the physical, it was the weight, it was the lunch,
it
was
cookies.
it was the cookies, it was all of that. But he starts being odd because of he is this new creation now in that sense. And even so, he starts living the truth where no matter the circumstances, I mean, stepdad and mom taking Charlie away, he still is who he is because that's just what's true.
Yeah. At the same time, I also do like the wavering that we see him in a few scenes where he's still needing the confidence that his child keeps pouring into him weirdly.
Right.
And at the end of the movie, we hear him say, "Thank you, Charlie." Because he basically, you knew it before I did. You knew more about it than I did. And we need those friends in life.
Yeah.
We need those people wherever it is. It might be from an unexpected source too. A person that maybe you wrote off as being a weirdo, and they're the ones that help you go, oh my goodness, this is who I am in Christ.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you fully accept it. You step into that place, and the change that came over him, not only the visual change, but the fact that you brought up the fact that he was berating Neil in front of him.
Yeah.
And he, at the end of the movie, is saying, we're a family. And family means we spend time together and we share.
Yeah.
And so we're a family, and he brings Neil, he does almost stumble over the word, but he brings Neil into that. There's no ugliness anymore. And yeah, it was a good change.
Well, of course, he's changed, but I noticed even, convincing even the harshest of skeptics of what's true in the end. And that kind of happened for Neil and for Mom as well. One thing that was very interesting on our radio show, we got a question about the holidays from a listener. And it kind of goes to that stage of where, we obviously, from the perspective, we knew the Santa thing was real for Tim Allen. But from the perspective of Mom and Neil, they think it's a crazy guy, right? And they're putting up boundaries in what they think is right, at the very least, to remove all visitation from Tim Allen. And it was a question kind of in that way of where do you place the boundary? A woman says, hey, listen, my cousin disrespects my aunt. He lives with her. He kind of mooches off of her. He steals from her. He has addiction issues. We have said you're not allowed to the cousin.
The word she used was banned.
Banned from family gatherings for the holidays. But my aunt was, of course, invited. But when we told her that my cousin's not, she said, how dare you? You don't turn your back on family no matter what.
Yeah.
And she's sitting here going, the Pearson email is going, listen, I get it. I want to have grace as a Christian, but also aren't boundaries a thing? What do you guys think?
Sure.
And I think that is a very interesting question. Of course, everything's going to depend on the circumstances.
Yeah.
But I don't think just because you choose boundaries doesn't mean you're not doing the Christian thing.
Yeah, no, I think it was such a great question to ask, which means she's not arriving at a conclusion easily.
Sure.
Which I think is so important for us to not just jump to a place quickly with these types of things.
Yeah.
Oh, he shouldn't come.
Right.
Boom, done. No, this is a person. We're thinking about now the safety of our own children at the risk of inviting him. This is still my aunt's child. Factoring all those things in. Are we doing this because we're uncomfortable? Or are we doing this because he could do damage here today?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times, because I have a very large family, and I actually been at a family reunion where there was an outburst. My dad was up as a children's pastor. He was presenting in front of the entire family. And because he was a children's pastor, knew how to engage kids. He had brought along some prizes. He would tell them a story. And then whoever was listening to the story, they'd get like, it was a piece of candy or something like that. And one of the cousins who had been a little bit too much at the bar that night, he just started yelling from where he was sitting in the audience. And he's like, oh, yeah, of course they're going to answer, right? They get candy. So you bribe them to love Jesus.
Oh my gosh, that's awkward.
My dad, from this stage, where the place of the spotlight, whatever you want to call it, he was standing there and on the microphone said, I will not engage you in front of these children right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can talk later, but I want to talk with you later. So there was a definite boundary, but at the same time, not disengaging. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? How do I continue to engage people for Christ, but disengage if there is, if there's a like you're concerned about safety and things like that? I mean, you don't want somebody in your house who you know is going to rob you blind.
And I don't think, depending on the situation, there's even any pressure to see them. Now, I think where I like what you're saying is, I don't want to get jaded.
Yeah.
I don't want to not offer forgiveness. Forgiveness should be on the table consistently if I'm a believer living it. But in a restoration of a relationship, that's going to be up to them if they're living in unrepentance. And I love how a pastor shared recently, we would never subject our kids to somebody, high or drunk or, whatever. And yet for some reason just like her situation, around the holidays, we go, we make an exception for family because that's just cousin so-and-so. No, you don't do that. I mean, that's where the firm boundary has to be.
Yeah.
But I get, you don't stop praying for him. You hope that he comes home or hopes you get to a place where he can literally come home. But you don't have to, I don't know. I think some people will, in a guilty way of thinking that I have to be graceful, they end up just enabling. Mm-hmm. And that's where you just can't get, we have to offer forgiveness, but not enable. And I know it's tough depending on the circumstances on any given situation. But
I think talking with somebody at your church too, who might know the situation better and can speak into it from outside of the circle, because emotions run high when it comes to family, when it comes to feeling a certain way when you hear a cousin go off on their mother, whom you love, and don't talk to your mom that way.
Right.
At the same time, them seeing an effort made. First of all, if my child was talking to me that way, I would already feel horrible. Mm-hmm. Now he's not allowed to come to the family gathering where maybe I could find some semblance of peace. It feels like you're not even trying to make an effort for me. You're banning us? You're banning us because you say him, I'm not going.
Yeah.
My child can't go. Yeah. So is there a central location that you could say and have that conversation? We love you and we love him. We want to be together. We're concerned about where he's at with addiction and things like that. And having a conversation with her one-on-one, we desperately want to see him. Can we all get together for a Christmas celebration? But let's do it here in a place that we can monitor that our stuff isn't, or we can make sure our kids, we've got a babysitter for them if we're concerned about an outburst, just so that he knows we are always here.
Yeah.
When you come home. And the prodigal son didn't even know that God would be sitting by the window in that story, waiting for his son to come home. But he did know that he would be available.
It's true. He went home.
And he's like, at least I could get a job. Yeah. If you make yourself available, then people are going to probably feel less betrayed. But when you ban people from gatherings, it's going to cost, and you have to be, it's a Holy Spirit question too. It's like, God, all right, what does your word say? What is the good counsel? What does wisdom say from counsel, which the Bible tells us to get? There's wisdom in that. And then stick to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Stick to it. We had a conversation a few months ago about when it comes to like identity, sexual identity, things like that. It was a guy that had lived in a certain community that had become a believer and changed. And he said, I think what Christians don't get is that when we say, whatever, this is wrong, what people can hear is, I don't like you or God doesn't like you.
Sure.
Instead of, no, this behavior is what Scripture talks against. And I don't know, that's what kind of reminded me of with the aunt, right? Yeah. She's hearing, we don't like him and we don't like you.
So how do you make her not hear that?
You have to say, do you think that the way that he talks to you is okay?
Yeah.
She's got to say no.
Right.
And if she doesn't, I mean, you might have a whole different situation on your hands. But okay, we don't want, for example, my 9-year-old hearing that on Thanksgiving Day. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
And she would, I would hope, say, well, I don't want him to hear it either. Well, here's the boundary. Something like that. Again, we're here, we haven't ever met these people. We don't know what exactly the level of anything is, but it just seems like if that's the situation of what we're reading, it would be good to have some space and have a good, like you said, heart-to-heart, probably in-person conversation.
I think in person is always going to be better because you can have the best of intentions. You and I have done breaks on our radio show where we take from Scripture what we need and we share it, and it's still been hurtful to people because their circumstances,
right?
They were in a place where they heard what you said just now, where it's like, you're wrong. How could you let this, blah, blah, blah. Jesus, wherever he went, he didn't waver from the truth, but he did it between the guardrails of truth and love when he would share. And because we have a God who is able to literally see us each individually, knows how many hairs are on our heads, right? He knows everything about us. He can share with us in a way that is going to be impactful, but also, when I say impactful, not disciplined, but what am I trying to say? I think he always wants us to strive to become more than what we allow ourselves to think we can only be.
Yeah, so, to constantly grow.
And then that defensiveness in us, I think he knows how to get to the heart of an issue to where either we push it aside or we'll eventually come back to it, or you're right. It pierces through the darkness with that truth, but I also know it's coming from a loving Father. And that's the way we need to be talking to people around us.
Yeah.
Unless I know that person, I should not be speaking into any sort of circumstance surrounding them, unless, of course, we're dealing with legal issues, right? If it's about the safety of people, if there's abuse taking place, get out of there. Mm-hmm. But if there's a set of circumstances where it's like, I can address these issues because I know exactly what's happening. I've seen it and I can talk about it.
Yeah. At the same time, that leaves the possibility that the woman that emailed us could say everything pretty much perfectly and it's still not received.
It could be like what happens with what I was sharing earlier. God tells the person in truth and love.
Yeah.
And they push him aside, maybe come back to it later. And that's what we pray.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
But he is desiring that every one of us, the whole creation speaks on behalf of God, is what the Bible says. It tells us about the Lord. Yeah. And so all of us see his glory. We see evidence for him. And we either go, what is this all about? And we find out for ourselves, or we just,
Yeah, sure. That's true.
Apathetic. Don't care.
Well, this is great.
One more thing
about the movie.
It was just really sweet. And at that moment when he's given the snow globe from Bernard, comes back later at the end of the movie, and he said, whenever you want to see your dad, all you have to do is shake that snow globe. All I have to do, doesn't matter when, he has full permission to come and be there. And that is just such a beautiful picture of our relationship with God. We don't have to shake a snow globe.
Sure.
He's with us.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's that precious, sweet connection we see with a child and this beloved character, who's, of course, his dad in the movie. But how much more should I be touched and moved by the fact that our God made it possible? He paved the way so that without hesitation, when I call upon the name of Jesus Christ, he's with me.
It's It's a little bit better than a weenie whistle.
A lot better than that dumb weenie whistle, which he looked a little ridiculous holding in his man's hand.
All right, halfway through our series, Finding Jesus and our favorite Christmas movies. If you didn't get a chance for Frosty the Snowman last week, you can go back and check that out.
Ooh, and plus don't forget our Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast is now available. We actually had a friend just minutes ago ask us, hey, when is that going to be up? It's up.
It's there. It's been there. It's there. It's anywhere you get your podcasts or at scroogepodcast.com.